Hello and welcome to episode 1395 of The Sleeper and the Bust. It is Sunday, March 30th. I'm your host, Paul Sporer, joined this morning by both Justin Mason and Gregg Martin, my buddy Greg, who I reference literally every episode. He's here. He's real. It's not a Bob Sacamano Seinfeld situation. Gentlemen, good morning. How's it going?
Good morning. Happy to be here.
I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked that Greg is a real person. I thought this was like, a Fight Club situation,
Right?
Where Greg was actually Paul, and he just keeps talking about how amazing he is.
Greg was the good version of me as a
Yeah.
fantasy player, and I'm battling myself.
Clearly,
Nope, he's
Greg
real.
is Brad Pitt.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, he would be the Brad Pitt, obviously, in this, and I'm the Edward Norton beating the hell out of myself. But no, real person, really great player. Been making a big impact in the NFBC lately. I don't want to make him blush too much because he'll get embarrassed. But we're going to talk some main event here. And we were going to do this regardless, but the fact that we all ended up with damn near the same pick just made it this much better. Justin, you and I both got that 13 slot. Greg got 14 in one of his. So we all had a main event where we were picking from the back end of the draft, which, I'm a big fan of. I don't mind being on the elbow. I actually like the 15 itself, the two picks in a row, but I kind of like working from the tail end there, especially if I can't get one of those top picks. First, let's start with what the game plan was for you guys. I came in wanting to get the same guy you did, Justin. I wanted to get Lindor. He was not made available to me. He went at pick 11. Let's start with you, Justin. What was your game plan? What kind of foundation did you want to lay? How early were you going to take Spencer Schwellenbach? And then we'll get into how you executed your plan. But what was the game plan coming in?
So the game plan was Lindor in the first, and then probably like Jarren Duran, or an outfielder in the second. And then I wanted a reliever, most likely in the third, and then Schwellenbach in the fourth. It did not work out that way because of the way the board fell. And then I think I made my first mistake in that beginning. I don't know. Should I talk about that right now?
Yeah, you can say. I mean, you can say who that was.
Yeah. So the first thing that kind of went awry was I took Lindor in the first, like I planned. I didn't expect him to be there necessarily because he had started to kind of move up the board like he did in yours, but he was there. Grabbed him, felt great. And then Gunnar Henderson makes it to me in the second. And I was a little perplexed by that. I knew he was going to miss the first, week or two of the season, but really just didn't expect a guy who I have as a top 8 player, even with missing the time, to be there in the second round. And so I felt like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to take him. I don't have him this year. Start shortstop. Maybe that freaks out, some other people. And I'm totally fine with the way that happened. I did not expect to have Reagans available to me in the third, and I was a little afraid that Schwellenbach could get sniped in between that 3-4 pick because Schwellenbach had gone in that kind of mid-third to back-end third. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to take Reagans here. I don't have him this year. I have him ranked above Schwellenbach as my number 7 starting pitcher. And then when Schwellenbach came back to me, I think that's where I made my mistake. I shouldn't have taken Schwellenbach, even though he's my dude.
Really?
I love him. I should have taken a closer.
I thought you were going to say Reagans was the mistake because then you're chasing your tail on saves the rest of the way, right? You ended up going kind of later tier and then specs. You got Kenley and then a group of specs. So you think it's Schwellenbach was the problem, not Reagans. I thought you were going to say you
I mean,
have taken
one
Reagans.
or two. I shouldn't have taken both. Now, I feel like I done okay kind of making up for it, but I could be in some trouble depending on how Bednar / Dennis Santana pitches rest of the way.
You did get both at least. So you have a piece of the Bednar failure with Santana. So if it's not Holderman and it is Santana, then you make up for that because Bednar looks as bad as he did in spring. So we won't go too deep there, but that front end and then after you took the 2 starters, I imagine the closers were pretty dried up. Was it always Doyle Yiner, or Doyle catcher, center field catcher? What was that next 2 plan there at the 5-6 where you got Doyle Yiner?
So my plan kind of for the next really 10 rounds was to just pound hitting and then sprinkle in pitching. I had to
did that.
And that's pretty much kind of what I did. Doyle was the guy I had pegged for the 5th round, and I was hoping he would make it to me. I didn't know if he would. I would have also taken Adley had Adley made it to me, but he goes 2 picks before me in my
Mhm.
draft. But yeah, I just kind of decided, hey, I want to pound some hitting and then sprinkle in pitching. I also jumped on Christopher Sanchez because I don't have him anywhere and I'm high on him, but everybody is. And so I was
He
like, here's an
is
opportunity
big
for
spring
me to,
riser.
yeah, an opportunity for me to get him. But I, overall feel pretty good about kind of executing my plan outside of kind of that mistake. And we'll talk about another mistake a little bit later, I'm sure. So,
Okay, Greg, let's get into your game plan here. You start with Vlad Jr. Genius move as far as I'm concerned, because I did the exact same thing. Now you've been very big on the risky class of aces, and what I would say that is would be Crochet and DeGrom specifically. You ended up with both. I think I have a text from you that says I'm not going to go Crochet again. And you immediately did it. So talk us through your first few rounds here. What was your plan going in, and did you have to pivot, or did you just end up making this the plan of big bat and then hot pitching, and then you'll attack the bats in the middle? What was your plan?
Yeah, so this wasn't my plan at all. I really wanted like Julio Rodriguez to make it to me. Scott Jensen took him the pick before.
Freaking strike.
I'm a big Tatis guy, and of course he's going to steal like 40 bases now with like the
Yeah.
quote that he had. So I'm probably going to regret it. I actually passed on him twice, Vlad and Crochet. And to add
But
context,
Tatis was there for both.
he was there for both. Yeah, I still picked Crochet. I just
I
couldn't
don't want
help
to make you feel bad. I loved Tatis, so like I see the vision there, and it is tough to pass him twice. Continue on. Sorry.
Yeah. But part of the reason why I kept taking like Crochet in this range, because the main before I took Scooble Crochet at the 15.
Mhm.
So, all right, maybe go hitter, but it's just the pitchers that come back. I mean, if you want to push it with Schollenbach, I think that's a fine pick. And I think Justin was in a unique case where Reagan's was there. He wasn't really making it to that turn. So I really wanted to get the ace there. So power ace. I didn't have a DeGrom share in a main. I have him in a bunch of DCs, and kind of he's my guy.
Right.
That's and all. So I just went that, and then the 2 closers. One thing about being on the turn, like I want to make sure that like I was definitely going to take a closer at 3-4 turn. I don't want to have to like reach for a closer like being on the end, and that's part of the reason why I ended up falling back on Duran, because I wasn't expecting him to be there. It's like, all right, let's just knock the saves out of the way, and then I could take hitter value or reach for hitters like further on, right, to catch up in speed, because clearly I was down there. So the plan from then on out was to kind of pound pitching the rest of the way in the middle rounds, right, mixing the pitchers that I kind of wanted to fit in, that kind of fit the profile I was looking for, which you guys can tell is just high strikeout starting pitcher, right? So I kind of like how it filled out. I think it's a little speed light, but I got guys like Joey Ortiz that I think can maybe steal 15 bases out of the corner.
Big fan.
So we'll kind of see how that goes, but that was the overall plan. And then towards the hitting in the middle, right, and then kind of just pitching at the end. And you guys,
I think you executed that. And,
Yeah.
you are a little bit speed light here, but I think that is something that can be addressed in season. And I'd rather be in the speed rat race than the saves one. So the fact that you opened up huge bat and then 4 straight pitchers with the 2 aces and the 2 relief aces, Diaz and Duran, after Crochet and DeGrom, I really think that you navigated that very well, because then you go Bellinger, Yelich, Bregman, or Rosarena. So 4 like really bankable hitters, right? No one that's like, oohing and ahhing people because they're not the hot spring guys. They're 4 guys that have numbers on the board though too. Multiple years of high quality work. I really, really like how you structured your base of hitting there after going 4 pitchers in a row. I think it definitely worked out. I talked to him a bit about, my plan. I wanted to get Lindor. He went, Tatis was second. He went right after. So Lindor, Tatis went 11-12. Vlad was part of my plan as maybe in the second round, him or Alvarez. So at that point, I'm like, well, I'll just go Vlad now. And then Mookie Betts made it. And, it's early. So I'm not going to sit here in victory lap because he's got a handful of homers. But it's looking like maybe the weight thing was not a problem. And that he was fine. And I mentioned to Justin after we talked about it for my second main that if he had gotten there to me in the middle of the second round, because I was picking 7 in that one, I might have had to take him there too. Now, it didn't end up, coming to fruition. So I can't say that I definitely would have done that. It's easy for me to say that right now, but I don't know for sure if I would have taken 2 shares of Mookie. But he certainly doesn't look like there's any sort of issue right now. Justin, after seeing a weekend of Mookie, because they don't play today, they got the weird schedule. again, I know I'm not saying you need to completely change your tune after 3 games, but how do you feel now? Because you were pretty concerned about him, saying you wouldn't even necessarily take Mookie Betts in the third. Do you feel like you're okay after this weekend, or you're still cautious about the full season for Mookie?
No, I think I'm okay after this weekend. I mean, I think he's playing, and I don't think he's sad at all, right? So like
No.
he played back to
He
back.
played all
so,
three games.
So,
Yep.
No, I definitely have concerns of just him being an aging player. And what
Which you
that
had
could mean.
before the weight
Which I
loss
had
thing, and I want to
before,
be clear on that you weren't just coming about this via the weight loss thing. You had some concerns from his injury
I had him
last
as a middle of the second round player
Right.
to begin with,
Right.
and then you add in the sickness. I think for me, and it dropped him down to probably end of the third, early fourth in terms of my values. I probably shouldn't have made that last drop, but I was never going to get him where I had him ranked anyway.
Yeah.
And if people were using my ranks, my projections, they were never going to get him anyway. So it's not like you missed out on him because I dropped him again. So, like I said, I still have some concerns about him long term, just because of him being an older player that has missed time.
And playing short, that's a bigger tax on Mookie's body for sure. But my goodness, did he tear up my Tigers? I was torn. I was happy that my main event team was getting the juice, but God, I wanted the Tigers to get one of those games.
Series.
It really was like. And I know it's a loser mentality to be like, we played close, blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't have the craziest expectations for the Tigers. They did play close. Like, it was those middle innings, and that's where those games are won. And a relentless team like the Dodgers that just keeps hammering you with star players, it makes sense. Like, I understand, it was a key pitch here, a key pitch there, the 3-run homer by Teoscar in the first game there. A couple homers yesterday. Dude, Freeman, speaking of looking hobbled, like he can't move on the field, but at the plate, we're not seeing any issue. I think he's only got the 2 hits, but they were both mammoth home runs. I know he had a single yesterday as well. But they're just a force. The Dodgers are unbelievable. And even though they're not quite peak Avengers, you're still pretty worried down there in the bottom of the order. Pages, Conforto, Edman. Rojas is probably your easy out of the group, but 7, 8, or 6, 7, 8 there with Pages, Conforto, Edman. That's a really strong 3 for most teams, and they're putting that 6, 7, 8. Greg, where were you on Betts once we hit the sickness thing? He was getting pulled out of the Freeway Series, which is the last battle there between Angels and Dodgers before the season starts. There was some consternation. People were worried. Keibert Ruiz was the big comparison because he lost a bunch of weight. The one thing I did say on the pod that Justin and I did was Ruiz went from league average to, a 75 WRC plus. Mookie, if he was going to lose 20 points, was going to go from 150, 140 down to 120, 130. And that's why I was still in. Where were you on Mookie as the final drafts were coming?
Yeah, so I was kind of like Justin. I wasn't going to really take him at the turn because I just don't know if it's enough juice. But I did take him in my third and last main in the middle of the second. Started Soto, Mookie, Jackson Merrill. So I was like, all right, this is a beautiful build, right? I'm trying to play like contact.
Wait, you got Merrill in the third?
Third, yeah.
That is crazy. That batting average, like you could take
and it was a
Langoliers, Raleigh.
I needed some speed out of that spot starting Soto bats.
I had Merrill as an option at the top of the second. I mean, I'm really high on Merrill, and so for you to get him in the third is just an absolute gift.
That is really, really beautiful. All right, so we already mentioned saves a little bit. Justin, you ended up having to wait. So after you take Reagan's, Schwellenbach, were all the good ones gone, and that's why you were just like, okay, Doyle, Diaz, Sanchez.
Yeah.
So you weren't in on like the Munoz, Duran, Walker?
Munoz and Duran were gone.
Oh, okay. Okay, so then you didn't even have a chance.
By the time I even have my third-round pick, Clase, Miller, Devin Williams, and Josh Hader all go. In between my rounds 3, 4 picks, so those 4 picks right there on the turn, Ryan Helsley goes, and then Diaz, Iglesias, Munoz, Duran, Walker, Bautista all go before my 5th round pick. And at that point, it's like either reach on Jeff Hoffman, who I've got concerns about, or Tanner Scott, who I didn't think was necessarily the dude, or Jordan Romano, or just wait. And so I just made the decision, like, listen, I'm going to build an offense I really, really like. Like I said, I'm going to sprinkle in that pitching as it goes, and I'll target the Janssens and Bednars as we get to, like, 9, 10, 11, and that's what I did. So
actually, I don't really have a problem with that. If one of those better guys had been there when you took Doyle, like a Munoz or Duran, I would have said that you kind of erred there and maybe should have taken them. But yeah, with it being Walker going the pick before you and then Hoffman being the next best one, I really can't blame you, because after Hoffman, I wanted Scott as well. He moved up about a round after the Tokyo save, so it wasn't the same thing as Robert Suarez last year, but I kind of liked him more in that 7-8 range. He was going pretty consistently in the 6th. I still think he's the A guy, but the A guy for the Dodgers doesn't get every save, and people are acting like, I can't believe that he went back on his word. No, this is how it's going to be. I still think Scott will get more opportunities, but those righties are going to get opportunities as well, especially if 3 righties are coming up in the 9th. Greg, we already know that you attacked the saves right away there with Diaz, Duran, so you were set. Did you get any other saves later? Well, actually, you both played the gambit. Let's get into that because Justin, as you ended up getting Jansen and Bednar, you knew your saves were a bit shaky, so you took the gambit. And you got Alex Vesia at round 21. Greg, you got him at 25. I want to start with Greg on this one. How are you on the overseas Freelook gambits right now? Are they being a bit overpriced now, year 2 of them? Because I think last year they were kind of a new thing. Get Daniel Hudson in your 27th round. But now we're seeing Vesia go as high as, well, even higher than Justin took. He was nowhere near the min at round 21. Vesia went 196 for a min, which is insane for one save. But where are you on these Freelook gambits once they're already established and we have drafts? Greg, start with you.
Yeah, I usually don't do it. Even this is kind of going off topic a little bit, but even when I'm making player ads, like, I mean, sometimes you have to fill in a hitter spot and you're looking at like the weekly matchups, but I'm mostly trying to prioritize. If I'm trying to prioritize multiple guys in that list, like I'm trying to look at which one do I think I could hold on long term. Like someone.
So then these quick hitting gambits don't work for you then.
Usually not. But in this draft, like I passed on a lot of the middle tier pitching. I knew guys like David Peterson and Chris Bubich, Bubba Chandler, like they weren't going to be available for that first scoring period. So I thought, okay, I have enough like SP flyers. I can still take a few later on, right? I think Vesia probably makes sense here. Throw him in for week 1, so I'm not taking a 0. And by that time, like a lot of the exciting like SP flyers were basically off the board. I mean, Landon Roop was still there. Maybe I should have took him instead.
Yeah, I like Roop.
But yeah, I thought it was just a good spot to just bank that save, and saves kind of bit me even when I paid for closers last year. So banking 1, and it turned out being 6 strikeouts as well. So pretty happy with paying that. Yeah,
it really doesn't end up being too bad. Again, Justin, you took him a bit earlier there at 21, nowhere near the min. You were there last year with Daniel Hudson specifically. Are you overpaying a little bit though? Oh, you're muted. Classic Justin.
Maybe I'm overpaying a round or 2. I think we talked a little bit before the pod went live, and I think the only guy that I kind of regret maybe passing on was the guy who ended up going in that turn pick right there, the 21st, 22nd turn, which was Griffin Canning. Yeah. So I lost out on him. But like even just like looking at the board, like I don't even know if there is a guy that I'm that bummed by not getting at that point. So I got Eduardo Rodriguez later. I got Michael Soroka later. Like I still feel like I got kind of the guys that I wanted to get.
You got some gambles that you like.
Yeah. And so for me especially, I felt like I needed to do it because I was kind of low on saves to begin with. And so starting off with a guy I could stream in, get a save. I also had a number of guys like, Rasmussen wasn't going to pitch the opening weekend. Mike Soroka wasn't going to pitch the opening weekend. So like I had a spot where I could kind of fill in and then drop. And now I'm kind of just looking, hey, let's go check out the waiver wire, see what is kind of available. I don't necessarily have a problem with it because the research that I've done on, kind of roster construction from draft to end of season shows that you're probably going to drop, even on a good team, 13-ish players.
Right. So your 21st round pick is not so sacred. And then again, it does come down to opportunity cost. I think you lost out. The other Met that you lost out on was McGill. And I think either of them would have been interesting, but not like so mission critical that you can't take the gambit where you did. Because again, you did still get some intriguing pitching gambles later. All right, so then as we moved, by the way, just to point out for my saves, I ended up getting Helsley, and then I waited too long. Everything kept going, and I was just like, I wasn't going to reach up for some of these scrubs, at least what I thought, guys that have partial jobs. So I just kind of kept pushing it. I ended up getting Urseg in the 16th. I think he'll get high leverage situations. He'll get occasional saves, and it's still a bet on Estevez maybe not being that great. Like I'm fine with Estevez. I actually would have drafted him, but I think Urseg, he and Puck were two of the middle relievers that I had no problem with. Like they're going to be stoppers. They're going to be in high leverage. So they're going to have chances at wins, saves, great ratios, great strikeouts. So I got him, Urseg, and then I got, who else? Oh yeah, Colin Holderman. And I actually wanted Kevin Ginkel. Then he went on the IL. So I cut Mitchell Parker for Kevin Ginkel in the first pickup. And now I'm going to cut Ginkel this week because he's hurt. So yeah, I'm gonna be in the freaking saves hunt, which is so annoying, dude. I hate chasing saves in season. It is a nightmare. Maybe Colin Holderman will take that job, although he gave up 2 on opening day himself. So if you give up 2 to the Marlins, you probably should be cut. Not from a fantasy team, but from like the real life team. The Pirates should be cutting him because he gave up 2 runs to the Marlins. Like that just cannot happen.
That whole bullpen is kind of a mess. Like
it's pretty nightmarish right now. Let's get Kent Tekulve on the horn and see what he's up to. All right, let's talk some middle round targets and kind of game changing pickups that you guys think you might have here. So let's start round 10. Let's go 10 to 20 here, Greg, and you ended up taking Nick Pivetta, Colton Cowser. Oh, that's a matching pick with Justin there for Cowser. Dansby Swanson, Gabriel Moreno, Mackenzie Gore. Ooh, are you sucking, Justin? Are you jealous? Nick Lodolo, Nico Horner, David Peterson, Joey Ortiz. Love that pick. Took him myself. JJ Bleday and Chris Bubich. Obviously, you like all 11 of those guys because you took them. But who are your favorites there that you think could really break through for you and be kind of upper round values for you, Greg?
Sure. Yeah, I think for this team on the hitter side, like I think Cowser and Ortiz can be big. Like I just kind of identified them as guys that I think may steal more bases. Like I think Cowser can get to like the 15 range. Same with Ortiz.
Totally agree.
I think Ortiz stole like 4 bases in the spring, high sprint speed. Brewers like to run, so targeting that for the corner, and he'll get shortstop at some point too, which is nice. So I think those Swanson as well too, adding like solid speed, 15 to 20. So I think those are core hitters to if this team is going to work. Moreno, like I don't know if it was the best pick there because I already had a decent like average base, but I mean I think there's more power to tap into, and I think he's just a solid catcher one. And then pitcher wise, like this is like the classic pitching that like I'm going to target.
Shoot the moon upside there. Yep.
Let's see what happens with Gore. I was encouraged by the first start, obviously, and then pushed up David Peterson like a few rounds. I know he had like pretty decent matchups to start. Like I'm using him for this two start week and using the 4-seam fastball more in spring. So I think there may be more swing and miss to get back to like the 25% K rate he was before. So if he does that for the Mets, I was just targeting Mets pitchers in general. So excited about that.
Marlins twice early on. You know, how can you not be interested? Honestly, not to gas you too much, but I really love this group of 11 here. There's a lot of guys that I was interested in. You got Horner for more speed. You mentioned Ortiz. I got him in my second main. He was definitely a primary target there that I really wanted. I got sniped on him in the first. He's somebody I would have taken on both mains. If I hadn't gotten sniped in the first main, I would have happily gotten Ortiz. I also see the vision with the breakout there. You mentioned Gore, his first start against Philly, just beautiful. If he cuts down the line drives so that his BABIP isn't 320 like it is damn near every year, I think he's got huge upside. We've talked Pavetta. I started being off on him, realized I was overly critical of his ERA because the whip and the strikeouts are there. And if he can cut his ERA, then he's a stud, right? But even if you get a 405 to 415 ERA with a great whip and a 30% K rate and a boatload of wins on San Diego, that's still really good.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, and
Go ahead.
I think it's just a good fit for this team. Like starting Crochet and DeGrom, like that's a really good like ratio base, right? So I don't want to follow that. Like I think a lot of people would say, okay, like you started really risky at SP, like try to follow up with like safe like innings fillers. Like I kind of take the opposite stance. Like I want the guys that may have more variance in their ratios, but have the upside to put up 200 strikeouts over 150 innings with a 3.5 ERA.
Yeah.
Like just compound on like those elite skills. And it is elite for Pavetta. I think it's like 24% K minus walk the last 2 years. Like that's like top.
Filthy. Yeah, that's absolutely filthy.
And then
what?
And then just the other comment. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Like I think Nico Horner is like a good example of somebody who like was injured throughout all of spring and was discounted in DCs for good reason, right? Like you're drafting your 50-round team like without ad drops, right? So you need to be cautious with those guys. But
right,
once we started to get more data on him, I don't think the market corrected enough. So why is there a 5 or 6 round difference between him and Andres Jimenez, right?
No idea.
Luis Rengifo, like just doesn't make sense. So like I was definitely targeting him as a mispriced player in that range for middle infield.
Yeah, I think that's a great call there with Nico Horner. He gives you that bankable speed, good average, good runs on a good team, and a little bit of pop, right? You're never going to be like, oh my God, Nico Horner's hitting homers for me at a crazy rate. But he can get you that 8 to 12 range, especially if he can stay healthy for the full year, and he was looking healthy by the end of it. Chris Bubic you took. Now, it's been a small sample spread out over a couple years. There was the 3 starts before the TJ and then 30 innings out of the bullpen last year. So again, we're taking very small samples on these 2 different seasons with a TJ in the middle, but it continues to look good. And I really like Bubic as well. He got up to round 20, which I don't think is some, crazy premium you had to pay. Do you see a potential breakout here with Bubic on the Royals?
Yeah, I think so. I like that. Like he doesn't have huge splits. Has a good changeup, so able to neutralize righties. I think the arsenal obviously fits as a starter. I was one of the guys who bought him before he got hurt in Fab like 2 years ago, but not letting that like affect how I approach it this year. So yeah, I think that's a good upside SP in that range.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by him. And Justin got a good one in that round, too, with Jose Soriano. Let's talk about your 10 through 20. With Riley Green, David Bednar, Colton Cowser, Drew Rasmussen, Cam Smith, TJ Friedel, Jose Barrios, Max Muncy, the Dodger, Tyler Soderstrom, Jacob Young, and Jose Soriano. Interesting group there. A lot of kind of everything. There's a bit of everything in there. There's some raw power guys. There's some crazy speedsters. There's ostensibly some saves if Bednar gets his crap together. You got Riley Green there in the 10th, which I like. I think it's a good group. And you got a Justin Mason staple, TJ Friedel back in the mix, but also Cam Smith. Let's start with him before you get into the whole group. Cam Smith in the 14th makes the team. Are you pretty excited about him also? He should be adding outfield, right? He's a third base eligible guy who should get outfield because that's where he's playing these days. Talk to us about Houston's Cam Smith.
Yeah, so one of the things I like to do in my main event, because it is my last draft of the season, is try to get some guys that I've missed out on. And I felt like Cam Smith was one of those guys that I hadn't had a chance to get. In my last auction, I lost concentration for a minute while I was like trying to update my sheet, and he went for $4, and I was like kicking myself. Now I only had like $6 left, so like if I had gone 5, that would have left me in some dire straits the rest of the way. So it wasn't like the biggest of losses in terms of kind of overall roster construction, but I definitely wanted Cam Smith. And so I was kind of just waiting and seeing like, okay, is there a moment in which I feel like I have to take this guy? And I felt like the 14th round right there, knowing that it was going to be another like 24 picks or something like that, or maybe more, the 27 picks or whatever it is, till my next pick. And I was like, I think this is the moment. And I don't think he would have made it back to me. And I wanted to have just one share of Cam Smith. So I took him, especially knowing that he was going to be on the major league roster, that he's going to gain outfield eligibility at some point. I just felt like he was a nice little fun gamble that I didn't have to overspend for. guys like this have gone in the 4th, 5th round in drafts before. We saw this with Wyatt Langford in, last year, and, Bobby Witt Jr. and Julio Rodriguez, like going in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds of main event drafts, especially the later ones once they get announced to the team. And Cam Smith didn't move up that far. He definitely moved up, but just not to the extent that other guys did. So I think it was a fun gamble. I'm looking forward to getting to watch him play more as a major leaguer. So I was happy with it.
A right-hander with some pop in that park. You don't really have to twist my arm. I was huge on Isaac Paredes. Definitely don't mind a Cam Smith gamble there. And again, I like how you really got a mix of everything here. You got a steady batting average guy like Riley Green. You got some upside with Cowser and Smith. Friedel, I think, has upside too. He has to stay healthy. So his is less skill and more health related. But then you got Muncy and Soderstrom for crazy power. Jacob Young cancels them out with he brings in his speed, I should say. And then Jose Soriano gets to open with the White Sox, and he looked amazing. Barrios, not so much. Are you worried by that? Or is that just, hey, Baltimore's going to Baltimore, and I'm not too concerned? Or are you thinking that it's going to be like that season, 22, when he opened with the dud and never got right? Are you worried about Barrios' first bad start there, Justin?
No, I'm not worried about anybody's first bad start. Unless there's a mechanical issue or going, oh, this guy's going to lose his job because of this, right?
Right.
I think Barrios being the opening day starter, he's in this rotation for the long haul. I'm not super worried about it. Now, if he throws up dud after dud after dud, then maybe. And I do have a kind of a roster crunch decision this week in terms of my starting lineup, because I have 4 or 5 guys who are 2-start pitchers. So maybe I don't start Barrios this week. Because I've got, my studs at the top, and then I've got a bunch of 2-start pitcher guys this week. So right now, we have one reliever in my lineup. So, maybe he ends up sitting for me so I can throw in a second reliever or something like that. So I'm not super worried about that. For me, I kind of take the opposite approach that Greg takes, which is I like the Barrios guys, the guys who are going to soak up innings kind of in those middle rounds. I think those guys get undervalued. And while obviously his first start hurt me, I'm not super worried about him necessarily hurting me the rest of the way. I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think Barrios is going to be fine. He is kind of a bankable dude for a 15-team league. It was really just that one bad season. I don't remember if it was 21 or 22, but he opened with 8 earned in 2/3 of an inning and never got on track. Even if you take that start out, the rest of the season was still pretty rough. But then the immediate next year, Barrios was back on track. So he is still pretty bankable guy. Did you have a favorite from these 11 picks, Justin, that you were was it Cam Smith or was it anybody else that you were just hell yeah, I'm glad I got this dude?
I have some guys who I just love in this area, obviously, like Drew Rasmussen, Colton Cowser.
Actually, let me stop you on Rasmussen. What kind of innings workload are you looking for from him? Because I'm kind of surprised that you were in on him, given your aversion to anything risk related. Where you at on what Rasmussen can deliver? Are you thinking triple-digit innings or just 90 great innings? Where are you coming out with him?
I have him for about 130. I think they need to just let him loose a little bit. I think so. And maybe that is overestimating it a little bit. But like I said, a lot of the rest of my rotation are guys who I'm pretty sure I'm going to get 140 to 170 innings from. So I'm not super worried if one spot is the spot where I'm not going to get that. And I just think the upside is massive. I did because I wrote that article for FTN, Vlad asked me to be part of their preseason predictions article. And one of the questions was, who's a guy going outside the top 200 in terms of ADP that could have the best pitching year out of that grouping, right? Obviously, he's not going to have a better year than Skubal or something like that.
Right.
And I picked Drew Rasmussen. I think he is a dude with massive upside that we were taking in the 4th, 5th rounds before the injury that people have not readjusted on now that he's healthy. He pitched last year, looked good, looked great in spring. So I'm a big fan of Rasmussen this year.
Yeah, he looks incredible. I've talked about the Tampa Bay pitchers and how I had and a crisis with them and a crisis in confidence of like, should I take them? And they're in that park. And I just said, nah, I'm back in. I still didn't end up getting too many shares because that's just kind of how the draft broke, but I stopped running from them like I did for a couple of drafts. Before we get into the end game here.
Before you move on though, because
yes,
I want to say, I think one of my favorite picks is one that's going to surprise you.
Tell me.
It's Riley Green
that does surprise me
in the 10th round. His max pick was 143 in the main event. I got him at 138, so pretty damn.
So you got
close.
Near max. Wow.
And like, I'm not a big Riley Green dude, but my values had him as the best value on the board at that point.
Yeah.
And for him to drop that way, like I was like, okay, I think that is a pretty fun pick. Hasn't been on any of my teams outside of dynasty leagues where I've had him since he was, a prospect. And I really, really enjoyed that. I also really like getting Tyler Soderstrom. And the plan for that was the hope that Soderstrom could get catcher eligibility because I didn't have a second catcher at that point. So I was able to.
You did take him comfortably knowing that that's a pipe dream, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I took another guy later on that I'm sure we'll talk about who is a full-time, looks like a full-time player, but catcher eligible and not catching. So I like the kind of the gambit there. Also love Jacob Young. I think he may be one of my more roster players this year, and I needed some speed at that point, so I felt like he could really kind of help there.
Blazing fast guy on the runningest team in baseball, Jacob Young as a Nat.
Maybe not though, because I think the Pittsburgh Pirates are trying to get a run for their and the Padres for some reason.
The Pirates and Padres running early and often for both of them, those clubs. You mentioned the Riley Green pick. Yeah, you got him. When you get somebody near max, obviously that means you got them way past ADP. He had a 117 ADP in the last 38 mains, which is from that last big weekend of March 22nd on. And so for you to get him at 138, that's nice. That's a full round plus later there on Riley Green. I like that pickup a lot. I do like a lot of your guys here. Like I said, you went back to the board with Friedel, and I love getting a guy whose breakout is not really contingent upon skills improvement, but just staying healthy. If you could now he has to stop running into the wall twice a week. I think I mentioned this before, but I can't remember how many times I texted you last year, like, oh, your boy dead. He's dead. Oh, wait, no, he's back up. Okay, cool. He's going to play the rest of the game. And then eventually it caught up to him. Too many run into the wall.
Pinball out there.
Right,
like, he just loves running into things. So.
And it's going to hurt him eventually. He has to be careful out there, TJ Friedel. They had to tell Bryce Harper that when he came up young. I think the Dodgers tried to tell Puig that, but you can't tell Puig anything. So he just kept running into the wall and eventually ran himself out of the league. All right. Before we get into the end game here, top 15 rounds. So first half of your draft there, Greg, were there any difficult spots that you felt were difficult because of where you were at pick 14? So anything, any category, any player type, anything that you thought maybe this was harder because I was at the 14 and I took, so-and-so pick earlier, or were you able to get pretty much everything you want the way you wanted it in terms of player style, player type and categories?
I think I adjusted how I approached the draft just because I knew I was on the turn. And again, I mentioned like taking the value at closer early just so I wouldn't have to reach. I think there's always like when you're at the turn, there's tough decisions. Like, okay, I have enough SPs, but I really like this guy, or do I take the hitter that I really think I need? And then because then you're dependent on what falls to you in the next set of picks.
Right.
So I can't really identify it just by looking at those decisions, but I'm sure there were a few where it was a tough decision between a hitter or not. I think probably like the Swanson pick was one of them because I knew those middle infielders were going to start to go, like Mason Wynn, Rafaela, Jeremy Pena went the pick before my Kowser picks. I was like, all right, I want to get one of these middle infielders with decent speed without pushing up a guy like Story, who was more of an average risk. I definitely passed on a few interesting pitchers like Brandon Pfaadt, Kikuchi, Luzardo that I was definitely looking at there, but it's those kind of decisions at the end that make it kind of difficult.
Yeah, and you're giving most teams are going to have 2 picks before you come back, so it can be hard to map out everything that they might do, and you just got to kind of go with your picks and kind of be confident in them. I wish I would have emulated you on the double closer there. I took Ozzie Albies in the 5th, which I didn't set his main, but I was one of the higher ones. Actually, no, I see now. Oh wait, hang on. I don't have mains selected. I think I jumped Albies a bit relative to where, in the main, his ADP was 87. I took him 73. Kind of wish I'd have just taken my second closer there to go with Helsley, because I ended up liking so many hitters in the middle. And that's what I tried to be more conscious of in my second main that's why I went pitcher to start. I took Scooble in the first round. I was like, I'll take pitching early, because that 6 through like 24 rounds, I love a ton of the hitting. And so I wish I'd have taken that second closer there. I don't hate Albies, and I don't think it was like some egregious pick at 73, but boy, it would look a hell of a lot better if Johan Duran was sitting there as my second closer.
I did kind of regret it a little bit because like Jansen made it to like the 9-10 turn. I like that pick by Justin. I think it's just bankable saves. So it's like, all right, would I rather?
And I think he'll get traded to be a close, like, because everyone says, well, he's going to get traded. I think Jansen's kind of going to get traded to be a closer.
They're not trading him to be a setup guy.
No.
And that's a problem 4 months from now. Like,
right. And that's another thing too. I don't even give a shit about it.
20 plus saves later. Who cares?
Right. I think too much gets made of that, where people are like, what about this trade? I was like, I don't know. Yeah. I'll worry about that when it comes up. So I totally agree with you there. But even specifically on Jansen, I just don't think he's somebody who's going to get traded to set up. But we'll see how it goes. Justin, same question there in the first half of the draft. We talked about saves and how you took the 2 aces there. I think that's going to be one of your big pain points. But anything else that you ran into where you're like, being here at the end, having to take 2 picks close together caused me a problem on this? What else besides saves, if anything?
I think it was saves was the main thing, right? Like I just spent the rest of the draft trying to figure out what I was going to do at closer. And therefore, like, I really took a lot of later kind of spec plays. And I don't know if any of them are going to work out, to be quite honest at this point. So the other thing was I took Marcus Semien in, what was that? The 7th round.
Eighth round, not bad. Eighth round.
No, and as far as like a straight up value perspective, I had him as the highest player on my board, and I love Marcus Semien. He's the only guy I think that is on every single one of my high stakes teams.
I feel a butt coming.
But what it did do was make me feel like I couldn't take another MI because I already had Gunnar, I already had Lindor. Right. Now I could have easily maybe put one of those guys in my util, and maybe I should have, because I felt like there were values along the way that I went, man, I really love Anthony Volpe, and he dropped in my draft. Mason Wynn dropped tremendously in my draft.
So did you regretted Semien, not Gunnar? Did you ever regret Gunnar at any point, or did you just
I
love
think
him
Gunner's
a second round pick?
I think he's an elite player that I got in the second round. So like I don't have a problem with that. Like, maybe if I'd known Gunnar was gonna be there, maybe instead of taking Lindor, who I already have shares of, I could have taken Tatis. I could have taken, Zach Wheeler and really started off my rotation and just had a completely different build. But ultimately, no. I mean, I don't regret taking Gunnar because I think Gunnar is a top 8 player that I got, at pick 18. So I don't have a problem with that. For me, it was more of a matter of like roster construction rest of the way. I missed out on guys like Colt Keith. I missed out on, like I said, Mason Wynn fell to the back end of the 16th round, which I felt like was a really, really
I like him.
Huge slide in terms of like where he went. Like I could have grabbed other guys like, Brandon Lau, who might have fit my team a little bit better than a Marcus Semien, but I didn't know that at that point, right? Like I could have used that power. So I think that was kind of my big issue. And then we'll talk about the other issue with middle infield here in a minute.
All right, let's get into the final 10 rounds here, Greg. Bubba Chandler, Dalton Varsho, Griffin Canning, Tyler Mahle, Alex Vesia, Osvaldo Bido, Michael Massey, Emerson Hancock, Tommy Pham, Mitch Garver. Nice, interesting mix there of, guys that can contribute in the long term. Somebody like a Bubba Chandler, even Dalton Varsho you're waiting a little bit on. Some short-term upside guys, obviously the Vesia Gambit we talked about. Canning with some great matchups, and he stood tall in Houston. So that's a really nice way to start the season with Miami coming up next. Garver, who I actually took as my C2, you got him in the 30th round. I didn't want to lose out on him. Too many catchers. Catchers were crazy in my first main. I could not believe where people were taking catchers. You got Emerson Hancock, who's kind of a short-term guy until Kirby gets back, but on in the best pitching park in the universe. Who are a couple of your favorites here from your last 10 picks that you're like, yes, this is who I wanted, and I'm so glad I secured them on the team?
Yeah, Osvaldo Obito, I have on I think all three of my mains.
Love Beto.
Yeah, I just like the stuff, and it's just like one of those high upside guys that I'm looking for, like at the end, see if it pops. Had a decent start last night, so that's good. Molly, I started to target when main events turned around. Like his last spring start, he was getting a lot of swings and misses on the fastball. Like that's huge for him. So,
any concerns by the debut? Because I felt the same way, and I was telling Justin, I was like, we were shitting on Molly, and all of a sudden, like he looks great in spring. Rough yesterday with the 4 walks, just opening, season opening jitters or whatever, or do you have any concern off of that with Molly with 4 walks?
It's concerning, but like these kind of like I didn't start him or anything. These kind of guys like I want on my bench, and this kind of goes more to like roster construction and strategy, right? The reason why I'm not looking for the safe S pitchers is because I'm gonna have 10 plus starting pitchers on my roster or whatever it is, right? Five of my 7 bench spots are probably going to be starting pitchers. So I'm trying to maximize like the weekly output. So guys like Molly, I don't need the safe guys to be in there for him because I'm able to rotate based on matchups and guys who are pitching well, etc. So if he has 2 or 3 bad starts like going forward, then he's just a draw for me, and I'll rotate that pitcher.
Yeah, 24th round, you don't have to get too precious about it, right? So, and like you were never starting him against the Red Sox anyway for Molly.
Yeah, exactly. So that, and then I think actually for this team, like Tommy Pham could be huge. Like if the Pirates are going to be running this much, he already has 2 steals. Like I need speed at this point. So I thought like Varsho and Pham as 6th and 7th outfielders is a really good combo. Right now I have Bellinger in the outfield, but I can always move him to the corner. So just like that flexibility that it kind of gives me. And I think Varsho's an example of another player that injured throughout the offseason. I don't think the market price really kind of caught up. I'll wait the 2 weeks for him to come back and hope that he can give me like a 2020 season.
And I talked about this on an episode. I don't remember which one because I bring you up all the time. You're not afraid of stashes. You're the way you build your teams, you have a comfort level with them that I don't necessarily share, but it has served you well. And you're not afraid to have upwards of 2, maybe even 3 stashes if you have enough flexibility with your positions and the starter quantity that you want, because you mentioned you like to have a lot of starters on. So you got Chandler and Varsho as 2 obvious stashes here because Chandler's not up and Varsho's recovering from injury. Can you talk to us a little bit about your strategy with stashing?
Yeah.
And where that comfort comes from? Sorry.
Yeah. Like obviously we have 7 bench spots, no ILs. It can get pretty limited. I think part of how I think about it is, again, with how I build the bench, like I'll usually have 1 bench hitter that has multiple positions that I can help fill in. If I miss out on a few ABs on certain weeks, to me, it's just not the end of the world. So like a lot of the pitchers on my bench, I'm not using anyway. So for the weeks that I'm not using a player on my bench, I think having somebody who I think is going to come back from the IL with incredible upside, right? Having them for those 4 weeks, right? It's not like I'm taking zeros in my lineup with them on my bench. So I just kind of look at it as like, okay, yeah, I can add this fringe pitcher who has like a 20% chance of actually being useful, right? Or I can add this great starting pitcher, a really good starting pitcher, right? Who's out for 4 to 6 weeks, who I know in 4 to who not know for 100%, but there's a decent chance that he's going to come back in this timeline, right? And then be usable right away, right? So it's really just you. Like I think you don't need stats on your bench. It's not a tiebreaker.
No, they're kind of annoying too. I know you should be happy that you have good guys on your bench, but nothing pisses me off more than seeing my bench pop off. I'm like, son of a bitch.
So I'm not missing out on 2 start weeks. I'm not missing out on innings because the way I construct my bench. So it gives me the flexibility to have 2, maybe 3 stashes. And obviously it reaches the breaking point, right? If one of your studs gets hurt and he's out for 4 weeks, right, then you have to drop one of the other specs that you had. But It's just different ways to leverage those bench
Well,
spots.
in my week to week, calls with you when we discuss Fab, I will say though too, you never get too precious about those stashes, and if push comes to shove, you kick them to the curb because you need it. And I do think that's where, because Justin and I are pretty aggressive about telling people to be very careful with it and not advocating it. I think mainly because the overarching principle that people have is that they hold them too long. And so that's why I'm trying to tell people, like, if you're not comfortable cutting the stash when you need the spot, then don't even do it, because you're going to hurt yourself. But you've never shown the ability to not be able to get out from under it. So again, yeah, if you run into something here where a few of your starters get hurt, Bubba Chandler's gone or Varsho's gone. Whoever it's going to be, you're able to move on from it. Justin, I've noticed that you're a do as I say, not as I do thing. Like, you're not against the stash when your drafts actually come along.
I think there's a misconception about being against or not being against stashes. I don't have a problem with what Greg did because the stash just came.
Well,
late.
You were saying he's a stupid idiot before he got on,
yes,
right?
Yes,
like when it was just us in the room, you were saying, we're bringing on this dumb moron. And I said, God, he's going to be here in a second. Don't say that.
So I have a belief, and I know you think of me being a little bit more aggressive in this regard than maybe you would be, but like pretty much anybody in the second half of your draft should be cuttable, right? If especially if there's an injury, if you need a roster, you need roster flexibility or to fill in, like, so like when you're taking guys who are stashes in the back half of your draft, I don't have a problem with that because you can cut them instantly, right? Like you can go like, hey, this 21st, it's the same reason why I was willing to take Vessi in the 21st, right? Because I know
because you're murking him right away,
right? And so, and anybody else who might be drafted there, I could just murk right away, right? So I don't have an issue with that, right? And like so I think did I get him? I don't know if I got him in this draft. No, I didn't get him in this draft. So one of the other guys that I almost took in this draft, but I didn't get him because I got sniped a little bit on him, I believe, was Giolito, right? Like, I took Giolito at the back end of both of my auctions, right? And I think the 29th and 30th rounds. But I know, like, hey, if he has a setback, if there's something wrong, like, I can cut him really easily. You should take guys who have massive upside, whether they're healthy or not, at the back end of your drafts. Like, especially in the last 10 rounds, like, yeah, if you want to take a gamble there, that's perfect. What I have an issue with is people doing that early on.
So like Strider.
Yeah, right? Like guys who you can't really count on to be there through the whole season. Like you were passing up in the, I think Strider went the like fifth round of my, I think he won the fifth round of my draft, right? So
yeah, 56 ADP in the last 38 mains, 34 min, 71 max. We're going to bring Greg in on Strider here in a minute, but finish off your thought there, Justin.
Oh, no, sorry. He went in the middle of the fourth round of my draft. And like people, the guy who took him in my draft passed on Dylan Cease, passed on Corbin Burns, passed on a million closers.
Oh, wait, no, you took Schoenbach. Sorry, you took him.
Yeah. He passed on Michael King. Like that I have an issue with because you were passing up on elite talent that you are pretty sure is going to be there for the majority of the season, if not all of the season. And I think that is my issue. So if that hasn't been clear in the past, that is what I'm talking about. Like, don't stash guys as a top.
And I think it has been clear. I wasn't trying to call you out on that. I was saying that your general principle is like, be careful with that. But it is usually those top tier guys that are hurt. Although someone could say you also took Gunnar Henderson in the second round.
That's true, but I think I'm only stashing him for a week. Or
I agree. I'm being a little tongue in cheek on that one.
I wish he was available to me at that spot.
Yeah, no. I love that pick too. I'm being tongue in cheek on that.
And I think the other issue with this, and I think we saw it was it your draft? But like I know it was in my main last year, where there was a guy who took all of them, like took every.
Oh, there was someone in mind who was taking all of them. Yeah, it was dead.
Yeah.
Like I don't usually like to clown people's teams because everyone pays their $1,800. They can do whatever the hell they want. And who am I to say who's great or terrible? This guy took a terrible team. He took every risk possible. It made no sense. There was no cohesion to it.
So it's not a matter of making the pick. It's how you then adjust your roster construction rest of the way. So like if you think Strider is going to be back next month and he is going to be the Spencer Strider that we know, and he's going to throw 140 innings or 130 innings of greatness, who am I to say that he won't? I don't think anybody knows, right? But then you need to be careful, because my whole issue wasn't the fact that I took stashes in that 2019 main event. It's that I took a million stashes. And then, and even if I had done that, a lot of those guys I could have dropped easily, right? But it was the fact I never made it to May, right? My whole gambit was, hey, I just got to make it to May. I didn't make it to May because
other guys got hurt with the ones that were already set.
That's when Stanton's injury problems started. Yep. That's when DeGrom's injury problems started. I had Buxton on that team. Garrett Hampson didn't break out. Like it was the combination, and I could have given myself a lot more wiggle room had I not made a lot of those stashes. Now I'm sitting on, in the third week of April with 7 bench spots, but 6 of them are
have red suitcases.
I can't drop.
You can't do it. Yeah. There were too high of picks to drop at that point because you had to wait somewhat on them. Let's talk upper level stashes then, Greg, because you have some Strider shares. You didn't get them in this draft, but I think you have them in at least one of your mains. Do you have differentiation between the higher end stashes and the lower end? Will you protect a Strider stash, or are you going to still double down and still go for a Pivetta and Gore and Lodolo and those high end type of guys? How do you feel about those top tier stashes? Let's focus specifically on Strider, because I think he was the big one this year, going top 60 pick for somebody who's slated to miss at least a month, but also looks great in those final spring outings.
Sure. So I want to preface, I have 0 Acuna. I think 4th round Acuna is okay, and that's kind of where he was going in mains. But I have 0 Acuna. Strider, I took in my first main, but it was at the last pick in the 7th round.
Oh yeah, that's right. You got him in before the skyrocket.
I was targeting him specifically I thought about him on the 5-6 turn, which would have been a value based off the other mains, right? But made it to the 7th, it was like a no-brainer. I was ecstatic. So this is after guys like Shota Imanaga's gone, Luis Castillo's gone, Hunter Green's gone, Roki's gone, Freddie Peralta, Hunter Brown. So I took him above Sonny Gray, Justin Steele, Zach Gallen. Like,
no issue.
I am so comfortable in that range there.
Yeah.
I think the market caught up and maybe a little bit too much. I wouldn't be taking him over like Corbin Burns and those guys, but I do think it's a really good chance at like 130, 140, 150 innings with 200 strikeouts, right? So it's about how you play. I'm really trying to, and I've said this before on other podcasts, but like, we play a season-long game, and so many people are so focused on projections that are based off of at bats, which are very hard to predict, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm more of a skills-based drafter, and I'm trying to maximize the weekly output within that season-long game, right? So yeah, it's over a season, but we're actually setting our lineups and making ad drops at a weekly level and really trying to concentrate and maximize that value, right? So someone like Strider will most likely give you like top 5 SP value when he's back, especially based off how he looked in the spring.
Right.
So like that, I want that on my team, right? And from the 7th round or 6th round or whatever. And to your second point, right, about following it up, yeah, I'm going to continue. Like, I started Scuba Crochet and Strider, and I just continued to follow it up with high upside guys, Clay Holmes, Scherzer, which kind of sucks, Arrighetti, Rasmussen, Lodolo, right? So again, just trying to volume these pitchers with skills, knowing that it's hard to really predict innings. Like, everyone's safe until they're not. And I know I've said that multiple times too, but I more approach it with, again, volume of the amount of pitchers that I have on my roster instead of like less volume with safer skills and safer workloads. So I think there's 2 ways to approach it.
What do you think about that, Justin? Because it is a little bit different from where you're at, where you will take some of those high-end volume guys who are alleged to be guaranteed, right? We've had major discussions about that guarantee. I lean closer to Greg on that. I like those guys, so I'm not shitting on you for being like a Logan Webb fan and even Barrios and guys like that. I like some of those guys too. Greg tries to talk me out of them. I just don't think that they have the certainty that you do. So how do you balance that?
Well, it's not that I have a certainty on those guys. It's more of a matter of I have a higher belief that they're going to.
Well, higher certainty. I'm not saying certainty in that you.
Yeah, I mean, no one's certain. Like,
right,
I mean,
right.
Even hitters, like hitters can get hit in the wrist. It's not even their fault. Like,
by the way, since you mentioned that, have we noticed, is it just small sample, baseball is back, we're paying attention, or have you guys not noticed an abundance of hitting the hand, hitting the wrist HBPs? I feel like we're seeing, I imagine it's just a overall strategy of trying to pitch inside, but my goodness, I feel like we're seeing more wrist and hand HBPs early on. And I'm just like, come on, Trout's first at bat.
Yeah,
I don't even have Trout, but I'm shitting bricks over there. Like, what? Come on, dude. Don't do that to me, Sean Burke. But anyway, that might just be noticing things, small sample size, but I could not believe how many. And then Witt had the one in spring as well, the one that we didn't get to see that we were all worried about. But anyway, sorry, talk about that. You're right. Hitters have risk too. But that difference between the bankable inning and not is I think where our biggest difference is that I don't see them as bankable, even though I still like those guys for their volume. So maybe I'm just contradictory to myself because I love Webb, but I know he's.
And I've taken Aaron Nola's. Like I've taken safer pitchers when I feel like.
Yeah.
And Aaron Nola's really not that boring in my opinion, but
I agree with that as well. I don't actually take a lot of those guys up top, right? You
took Reagans, Schrombach, and Sanchez. So yeah, you are not loaded with boringness. I would say you have some major upside.
I don't have any Logan Webb or Framber Valdez this year. And that's because if you're taking a guy up top, you're expecting him to be around for a while, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Even if they may have a little bit riskier profile. Right. Yeah. And that's why DeGrom was a guy, like my projections say, even at I think like 130 innings or something like that, that I should have taken DeGrom ahead of Reagans and Trollman.
So how's that disconnect work then? Because you hand do these. And I know we've talked about it a lot, but for people that don't know, Justin goes in one by one. All these other nerds got their algorithms. Justin's brain is the algorithm. He goes player by player, does his analysis, and then puts in the projection. Where do you decide when to veer from them, though? Because even your projection said DeGrom's the guy here, and you went Reagans.
So it's the format, right?
Okay.
And in the format, when you don't have IL spots, I stay away from DeGrom.
Okay.
And Coward. If I had taken a player that I feel like just super, super confident is going to throw 180 innings, like a Framber Valdez or like a Logan Webb, like then I can make the argument like that I can pair him with DeGrom, right?
But you'd have to take DeGrom first. That's the tough part, right?
And that's the hard part. And you don't in a main event, like I saw in like my main event with the closers, like you just don't know where guys are going to go.
No.
And so for me, like I have no problem, like as you start to build your rotation becoming riskier and riskier. It's for me, it's at the up top that I don't like to do that. I think you should take risks. You should take gambles. But for me, I prefer to take them later because if and when they don't pan out, or when they don't pan out, I want to make sure they're droppable guys, right?
So what is your assessment of Gregg's setup here, though, with Crochet, DeGrom? I don't think you would ever do that combo. And then how he backfilled it. Like, what is your assessment? Because, again, offline you were saying how stupid and lame it was, but are you going to say it to his face right now? No, I'm just kidding.
So for me, and I don't have Gregg's board in front of me to to kind of look at it.
Oh, the rest of the draft. Okay, I was going to say, yes, you do. You have all of his picks right there. No, you're talking about the whole board.
For me, I don't necessarily have a problem with the DeGrom Crochet Gambit. I wish it was a different pitcher. If you're going to take DeGrom, I wish you pair him with a Logan Gilbert. I wish you pair him with a Zach Wheeler, like guys that we think are we're more confident on in terms of.
I want 35% strikeout rate though.
I get it.
The K's from those two. My goodness.
For me, this is way too risky of a pitching staff for me. I love the offense, but to look at and go, okay, Crochet and DeGrom, you know what, that is what it is. It could be massive, it could be a huge mistake, but then to add Mackenzie Gore, who has just mechanical issues up the wazoo. I think he was tipping last year. You look great in that first start, but who knows what, he looked great in April last year and then completely fell apart as well. Like Lodolo with his
it was longer than that. Do not be hating on McGore now that you're out on him.
I know it was longer than that, but I'm saying this is, April. Well, it's March, but he looks great now. But will he look good in June? Will he look good in July? And then adding Lodolo's injury risk. David Peterson has been kind of a Charlie Brown type, trying to kick the football for a number of years. I actually really like the Bubic pick there, and I like the Griffin Canning pick, and I like the Molly pick. So like, I don't have necessarily have a problem with any individual gambit. It's the combination of it, right? It's the accumulation of risk after risk after risk that is what I have an issue with, because the thing about risk is you're multiplying, and when you multiply percentage chances, they get smaller, right? That it's going to hit together.
That's going to work. Yeah.
But that's the chance that every single pitcher is going to hit, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
And that's the reason why I volume it, and that's why I have 6 pitchers on my bench, right? It's like if one of those go down, and that's the reason why my Strider team finished 4th in the main event.
Yeah.
Is because
he lost Strider last year. Sorry,
that
you had the first pick or second pick where you took Strider?
I had the 4th pick, so he was going
fourth
first
pick.
or second, so he made it to the 4th pick, so that's why
Right.
I took him there.
So tell us about that team. That was the one that finished top 5 overall.
So I was actually looking back at like the draft and like just to kind of compare. So like I got Luis Hill in the 21st round. Like other starters to go in that range, Dean Kramer, Ranger Suarez. I mean, he had a good first half. Michael Waka, right? I don't think my team gets to where it is if I don't have those 150 innings of elite Luis Hill strikeouts and stuff, and I replace that with a Dean Kramer. So it's just like it's a continual shots at this, right? So that when it doesn't work out at the top, right, I have pitchers with similar skill sets that are able to fill in and kind of make up that gap. And again, that's rotating these spots, but yeah.
No, that's a really good point, because so the way he built this, Justin, like how many does he need to hit on for it to be quote unquote worth it, right? Because like the one he'll hit basically made up for Strider, and then he's back at normal and he kind of goes from there. So this is why we always say too, like, I don't want to hear that your first round pick is why you lost. Like, it's a bummer if you lose him, and you're I'm not saying that against you. I'm saying we both say that on the show, where it's like, tell us the rest of the story. You didn't manage well enough, right? Because you can maneuver around that. Greg finished 4th in the overall, taking Strider at number 4 pick. And yes, he needed Heel to hit, but it's not just those 2 moves in a vacuum. It's all the rest of the stuff he does. But how many gambles do you really think need to hit at the high end to be worth it, even if you have to burn and churn the rest, Justin? Like if Gore's an ace this year.
If Gore's an ace this year, then
doesn't that give him a full cushion on Crochet or DeGrom to flop?
It could, but it also couldn't. Like, I mean, like, it's hard to know, honestly. Like, to your guys' point, like Phil Dussault, when he won his overall, he, I think, drafted Trevor Bauer in the first round. And
he also was the first to cut DeGrom.
Yeah,
like
and
he made that aggressive move.
I think he went DeGrom. I think he had actually pocket aces. Like, I think he went Bauer DeGrom. And lost both. And still, like, you can do it. You're hamstringing yourself a little bit, right? And you're setting yourself potentially at a deficit. Now, you could be at that deficit, like you said, either way, right? The year like Lucas Giolito fell apart, like
when he was a first rounder,
and I took him in the first round, and I draft for safety, right? Like you can't predict that. But if you're telling me there's like an 80% chance this guy's going to do something versus the 60% chance this other guy's going to do something, I think you should, especially at the top, you take the 80% gamble, especially when we're talking about guys with pretty similar skill sets, right? So for me, it's a risk profile, but like, I don't think there's one way to build. I don't think there's
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree there's multiple ways to build. That's the beauty of this game. If we all had to build the same way, it'd be boring as shit.
Yeah.
You can do so many different things with how you set up your team. Totally agree with that. I'm just trying to get you to be a little bit less risk averse, because I think you still need some risk. I know. I'll just keep
you do need some risk, but for me, I don't think that the return on investment comes from taking that risk early. I think the return on investment comes from taking it where Greg does take it.
So wait, okay.
I just want to point out one thing, actually. Like,
go ahead.
So second and third round last year, SPs, right?
They were terrible, weren't they?
You had like Luis Castillo, safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had George
Pablo
Kirby, that
Lopez.
yeah, Pablo Lopez, right? Kevin Gossman, right?
Mhm.
So I look at it and it's like those were the safe guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
They failed from a skill perspective. So instead of just looking at risk from like a workload perspective, like let's look at risk from like a skills perspective. Not that I was necessarily fading any of those guys from the skills, but those skills aren't as good as the Crochets, the Groms, right? Those aren't 25% K minus walk guys, right? So like I mean, guys like Pablo Lopez like really hurt you. Like I'd rather have a first round Strider, I think, than a third round Lopez or a third round Gossman. So I just think there's different risks, right? So, but yeah, I understand where Justin's coming from too. I think taking risks later on, like I think that's a good way to approach it as well. And that's why I think maybe like that Vestia pick was a little too early because there are like these upside SPs that you can have on the bench and see if they hit.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't think we're like off that much.
No, and I don't think so either, but I'm going to belabor it a little bit more here just to ask, because, you know, Crochet and DeGrom, yes, they are risky. How did they not have as much risk as a fourth round Schwellenbach, who has one not full year of like, so like where do you assess, like where does the risk assessment come from? Because can't people look at that and say, you took a pretty risky pick there? You got a guy with 124 major league innings. And I love Schwellenbach, so this is not an anti-Schwellenbach take, but aren't you taking just as much risk?
Yeah, maybe, but I'm taking it two rounds later than that. Yeah. Like,
Well,
so,
one round for DeGrom,
one
but
round
two
for
rounds
DeGrom.
for Crochet. Yes.
And like I said, but like I said, like my projections say like take DeGrom above Schwellenbach, right? I just didn't because of the format in terms of I don't want to, risk losing the guy.
Right.
Maybe it is. And if Jason was on the pod like he usually is on Sunday, he would tell me that Schwellenbach is just as risky, right? That
yeah, he's actually been pretty down on him.
I think it's just the way you look at the player. I look at Schwellenbach as a guy who threw a bunch of innings last year, especially if you include the minor leagues, and I don't think he's as risky, especially because the skills are so good.
Yeah, I think it gets, and I would say this to Jason to his face, so I'm not like talking shit behind his back. But I think we get in this catch-22 now where like pitchers can't do anything right, because if they don't have innings, we say, well, they haven't pitched them. They haven't pitched the innings. Then they have an innings jump, and they say, well, then the innings jump is too high. And I'm like, come on, man. Like I see somebody take 160 innings like he did last year, Schwellenbach, and I'm happy about that. I know it's a big jump, but I'm not fully bought in on the Verducci effect, which is what that is X number of innings is problematic.
Right. I think here's the other difference between like Greg and I is Greg is drafting three mains. Right.
You have your one shot.
I have one shot. Right.
Do you draft differently with that, knowing?
If I had three mains in, I might take a gamble on a DeGrom or a Crochet, in one of them.
To diversify your portfolio a little bit.
Right. Because I love their talent. And, I do think there is a chance they do figure it out, right? Because when I put 130 or whatever innings I can't remember off the top of my head, what I put for DeGrom, like that's a median projection, right? So that means that there is, a reasonable chance that he throws 60. There's also a reasonable chance he throws 190. Right. And if you're getting that 190, like you're probably doing pretty damn good. So for me, and I think a lot of the listeners too, like they're not doing 17 leagues, right?
Right. And we try to be mindful of that too when we talk about different things where it's like we do have a portfolio, and I know people get up in arms about how it's not a portfolio, it's not shares.
I treat every single format as their own portfolio, right?
Right. So you have your auction portfolio,
my
your
auction
draft
portfolio. I have my my
15
main
team.
event, my main event portfolio. If I had three main events, there'd be one riskier team in there, just for the hell of it, right?
Right.
But because I don't, because it's a one bullet thing for me, I'm trying to draft as safe as possible to make sure that I can, have that team be competitive the entire year.
Safety doesn't guarantee competition. So I want to pivot a little bit here, and we're going to open the floor to Greg here in a moment to ask us some questions since he's on. But I'm looking at this thing on MLB Trade Rumors right now. Two tidbits of news that are related. One, Christian Campbell in deep talks on an extension with the Red Sox. Two, Devers will be the primary designated hitter. Greg, I want to start with you on this. Where were you on this whole saga of Devers staking his claim to third, which would have moved Bregman to second, which would have blocked off Campbell, that eventually got settled the way most people thought it would, which was Devers going to DH where he belongs, Bregman at third, and then Campbell, played his way in. Is it because Campbell forced his way and created this, or would Vaughn Grissom have just taken the spot? And how do you avoid the noise versus like what matters here? Like I'm just curious how, and I'm going to ask you too, Justin, like how you played this situation. It didn't take me off of any of them. Devers, or the Devers injury took me off of him a little bit until it looked like he was healthy. But I was never very worried about Bregman, and I really wasn't I wasn't drafting Campbell, so I didn't end up getting him. But how do you play with this noise versus signal situation where it ended up all being a bunch of bluster bullshit? And if you'd have just taken the best guys, you were getting discounts on Campbell when people didn't think he was going to make the team, on Devers when it was looking like he was going to be hurt. How'd you play on that Boston situation, and did you get any of these players, Bregman, Devers, or Campbell?
Yeah, I was trying to take the Devers discount. It didn't work out in my mains, but I feel like a fourth round Rafael Devers is just a steal, and you're just kind of capitalizing on fear.
I got him in my second
he struck out 10
in the
times in
fourth.
3 games. I think he set an MLB record, so we'll see how that plays out, but I'm not too concerned. And then Christian Campbell, having one of my 3 mains, I took him in the 22nd round. It feels pretty good, but it seemed like they wanted him to make the team.
Right.
So I went Scott Campbell on a turn, but just got on Campbell. I feel really good about that.
Ooh, that is a flashy
turn, and then followed that up with
upside.
Austin Hayes, Gavin Smith for safety. So we'll see how that goes. But and then the safe guy, Austin Hayes, is on the IL. So look how that works.
Right.
But yeah, so I definitely a fan of Campbell. Again, it's just like picking those spots for upside. So
yeah, and I've part of the beauty of our discussions is the ability to cut through some of that noise, just talking through some of these things with somebody else, and just that's the beauty of having the podcast with Justin, having our weekly calls where it's like, let me talk with this over with somebody else instead of just being in my own head like, oh, Bregman's going to play second, Campbell's not going to play. No, it was always going to go this way because Devers is a horrendous third baseman. If he was even a capable third baseman, I could have maybe seen the cascading going the way he wanted. But the only thing that ever clouded it was his injury. How did you play the Boston situation, Justin? Did you get in on any of those 3 there, Bregman, Campbell, or Devers?
I didn't. And it wasn't that I didn't want to get in on Campbell. Someone always popped in my draft a little bit earlier than I was willing to do.
You were drafting later too. Like,
yeah,
my first main was on 315, so like this was before all this was kind of hashed out. And Campbell and Scott weren't somebody that I was really chasing up the boards. Like when they got moved up like 4 or 5 rounds, I was like, there's really good hitters here that I don't want to take them over. So understand why you don't have any.
Yeah. So for me, like I was never able to take that shot on Campbell. Devers was a guy I just avoided. And it was it's mostly the concern on the shoulder and a little bit of concern on the moving to DH. We've seen a DH penalty on guys that kind of leave the
10%.
field. Yeah, and that 10% is massive when you're taking a guy in the second or third round. So I just kind of avoided the situation, and knowing that, hey, it's kind of like the Mookie Betts situation, right? Where like I think Mookie Betts could still be an elite talent. But everybody that going at that point is pretty much an elite talent. So like
they're all studs.
So what am I missing out on? I think the one I kind of regret missing out on is the Campbell, but I couldn't pull the trigger quick enough in any of my drafts. And Bregman was a guy that I would have been totally fine with. I think Bregman is traditionally a guy that is undervalued, especially in the NFBC markets, because he's boring. But I think those boring players win you championships a lot of times because he volumes. The problem was, I think, the trade and then all the continuous news about will he play second base? Is he going to add that eligibility? Kind of pumped his value up to where he should be going.
Right.
And so now you weren't getting kind of that added value because he's boring. It's kind of already baked into the price. So I didn't end up with him. I would have been fine ending up with him. But I think I said it after the trade and continuously through like that whole saga. It's like I didn't think he was going to be playing second base at any point. I think you were dead set on that with Bregman, that second base
Not going to happen. He's going to play third. Devers going to play first or DH. Because originally there was like, well, maybe they still trade Casas because he was in some early trade talks, and Devers could have stayed on the field. But obviously, once the shoulder hit, they're probably like, well, we don't want to. We don't want to risk that. Let's just keep Casas, DH, and there you go. So we'll see. It looks like Campbell is going to get a deal signed. He looks like the truth early on. He's got a bomb. He had a hit in his first game. It's obviously 3 games. I'm not going to go too far with it, but he is pretty dope. All right, we got a few minutes left here. Greg, I want to turn the floor over to you because I know there's some questions, some topics that you want to discuss with Justin and I. So why don't you go ahead and give us a few questions while we wait for your laptop to die?
Yeah, I feel like we hit on a lot of them, just the different ways we play.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about zone contact rating?
I
know Justin does.
No, I mean, I think it's something to look at. I don't think I would base a lot of my analysis on that. I think we play a 5x5 game. I think there's a lot of guys with really bad plate discipline that end up being really good fantasy players. I think Justin realizes that to a certain extent, but like I personally would be drafting a 10th round Ezekiel Tovar for multiple reasons. Right, like he's 23 years old. He's an elite defender. He plays in cores. Right, he played with like appendicitis last year, so I think there's a lot more steal upside. Like he's still in the minors, so that's a path to upside. So to me, he was just like a rock solid middle infielder, and it's not a risky profile to me, but to you, it is a really risky profile. So just like examples like that.
So I learned during Potapalooza and PitchCon that your other podcast co-host, Justin,
he gives me shit all the time.
Gives you way more crap than I do about everything. And it was like I was looking at myself, in a mirror there, like, where I will say, oh, Justin on his damn zone contact again. Dave unleashing the chamber on you, dude. Oh, we're talking zone contact. Huge surprise.
He does every episode, right? And
talk to us about your zone contact obsession, and do you think you go too far with it?
It's not that I go too far. I think there is an assumption that is the only thing I look at, or that it's even necessarily the most important thing. It is an important thing for me. A guy who can make contact in the zone, like that's how you get on base.
It's a very valuable skill. I'm not denying that, by the way. I want to be clear. But I like the Tovar example. Can we do that first, the Tovar example, and then talk more broadly? Because, like, Greg sold me on Tovar during our DCs, where I'm like, yeah, you're right. This dude went 26-6, hampered at age 22, 9th, 10th rounder. Yeah, I'm in. And I ended up with him on the 2 teams with you, Greg, and then 2 other teams on my own, just because I totally bought in on it. So where do you, like, move off of the zone contact to just absorb the skills and then get back on your zone contact with maybe some other guys to kind of protect his batting average in a Tovar example, let's say? I'm
trying to find my Tovar projection, but he's so low I can't find. No, that's not
498.
I just have like 2,000 players on this sheet, so trying to find an individual one sometimes I'll just sort by Colorado, so that way he'll be right at the top. So, like, for instance, like I have Tovar with, 22 home runs. Is that right? Maybe my Tovar projection is off, and that was the problem.
Did you misjudge Tovar?
I might have. Give me a second, as I apologize. Oh, no, okay. Yeah, so I have Tovar with 22 home runs. I felt like the power was going to dip a little bit. I have him with a 244 batting average, and I have him with 7 stolen bases. So that kind of profile, like, I think I have him kind of.
I think the average is where you lose me, because I think his BABIPs are going to stay high in Colorado. 328, 344 the last 2 years yielded 253 and 269 batting averages.
Well, and maybe I am a little.
That's probably where I think you're lightest. I don't mind maybe bringing down the power a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess this is the last point I want. Sorry, Jess, if you have more.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say that I think the last point is it's so funny because, like, I'm an analytical guy. I work in technology, but, like, I just think projections are stupid. Like, and nothing against anyone who uses them, because, like, 99.99% of people, like, really use them. But, like, I follow this stuff so closely. I know the general, like, skill set of all of these players. And when I'm going into draft, I'm trying to balance those skill sets, right? So that I have a balanced team in terms of power, average, and speed. So it's like at bats are so hard to predict, right? And like you guys were talking
that's
about
the toughest
2
part.
weeks ago, like you adjust like a win by one, and now this player's a value instead of a fade. It's just like I try to. That's why I'm looking more at like the skills and like even with Tovar, right? Like you look at the stats and it's like it's like it's fine for a middle infielder, but it's like he also stole a lot in the minors, right? So he's trying to project like those kind of gains, and it happens all the time with these younger players. Like people were fading Bobby Witt at the end of the first round before he completely broke out. Ellie De La Cruz last year. It's like if you like some of these players, you have to like look at the skill set, look at their context, and it's like try to project like potential upside as well and paths to upside. And that's something that like James Anderson mentioned at like first pitch, which really stuck with me. And that's how I think about things. It's like guys like Tovar has these paths to upside where he can really be a game changer.
And I can see the upside on a guy like Tovar.
Yeah.
I think part of the issue with, one, I don't like the underlying contact skills, right? Now, can he make that work? There are plenty of guys who make it work. Absolutely. And this is why I say, like, yes, zone contact is an important thing for me, but like I've been a huge Randy Rosarena fan. He's never been a good zone contact guy. I was out on him this year moving to Seattle, but there were other things in the profile that made me go, okay, I think he can overcome this. Now, I think that those kind of guys, like a Tovar, like a Javi Baez, like they will drop off suddenly at some point. It made for Tovar, it's probably not going to be for the next 3 to 4 years. One of my other issues with Tovar, and I don't know, maybe we just didn't dig deep enough into him when we talked about him, was he's on the Rockies. Like that team around him isn't very good. So I don't know if he's going to have the upside of being a 100-100 guy at any point, or even a 90-90 guy at any point. They're also a team that doesn't run. Like they were 25th in stolen bases last year. And so like projecting that stolen base output to jump even into, like the teens, I think is difficult to do. And while you say you don't like projections, I think you do. You just don't like the written projections that other people do, because you're still in your mind projecting what you think this guy is going to do.
Sure.
But not living and dying by it, I think, right? Having some flexibility off of it, thinking it as more of a range than a number.
My argument is that Greg is doing exactly what I do. I'm just doing it out on paper.
Yeah, and I'm also doing it like per plate appearance. You know what I'm saying? Like what are your home runs per plate appearance? Like and less worrying about like playing time, because again, that's stuff that I'm also projecting in my head, like really good defender, all this stuff like that all gets banked into account. So I mean, it's just something that's gone through my head because I did a lot of auctions here, did like the ultimate auction, and it's just like you have some of these people that like I cannot go over this number, and it's like
that's the part I'll never subscribe to that.
Buy at $9, right? I don't think it is, right? There's
say that again. I'm sorry, I steamrolled you.
Like just an example, like he's like Paredes, like had projected 22 homers. Like you don't see a world where he hits for more. Is $9 really bad? It's that lack of flexibility, and I think people just get too stringent in that.
That's what bothers me about projections is the lack of flexibility.
So for me with auctions, it is more about making sure that the dollars I have accounted for stay accounted for, right? And so what I think, and I've mentioned this recently on podcasts, I'm sure I've mentioned it with Paul, is I think that the talent level at auctions in the NFBC is not nearly as strong as the talent level in the snake drafts. And that's because people don't stick to values. They just go, I'm getting this guy and I don't care what I pay. And that is actually better to do in a snake draft because you're going to have levels of value at every round, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can reach on a quote unquote reach on a guy in a snake draft and know that the next round it resets itself, whereas in an auction you can't. And I think that is where you can make a lot of money in these auctions, and I've done really well
you've had
in these auctions.
Great success in your auctions, absolutely. So I think nothing from you there.
Yeah, because there's so many people that will go, because there's nothing wrong going $1 2 over.
Sure.
right?
It's when you go 7-8 is the problem.
It's when you go 7 and 8, and then you, instead of getting a $7 or $8 player later, you have to take a $1 player.
Right.
Like, and in every single auction I've been in the NFBC, or really any auction I've ever been in, there are people who do that, and they hamstring the back end of their roster. And I would rather be like really confident about sticking to my values, especially at the top end, to make sure that the back end of my roster is way better than any other team.
Yep. You pile too many $1 guys, you are going to be in trouble. I totally agree there. Greg's laptop's going to die at any moment right now, so I want to make sure that we get a proper goodbye and thank you for him for coming on. This will not be his last time on. I'd like to have you on regularly during the season, and hopefully your laptop is charged for us to talk tonight to get through Fab. But Greg, thank you so much for being on with us. Where can people follow you on Twitter?
That's a good question. I think it's Greg5796.
Yeah, I believe those are the numbers.
Yeah. So yeah, Greg5796.
Greg with 2 G's.
And yeah. So
I'm really glad we had Greg on, because him and I have very differing views on how
that's why we wanted
things. But I think
to have both
is a really good way to show that like both can be successful, and Greg has been extremely successful. And so I really appreciate you coming on and pushing back on me. Like, that is awesome.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of times guests come on, they feel like they have to treat me nicely, and I don't want to treat them nicely.
Because it ain't personal, right? We're all doing our own thing. We're all having a great time playing baseball, fantasy baseball, and we want to,
This is why I stay out of leagues with Greg.
Right. Generally avoiding him is a good idea because he's a wonderful player. Greg, thank you so much for coming on with us again. We will have you on again in season, and I'll talk to you later tonight. Take care.
Of course. All right. Thanks, guys.